Confession in just a second. Don't forget the latest podcast dropped on Friday. All of last week's, plus some of the stuff that we weren't allowed to broadcast due to the hard, stern, disciplinary hand of Sister Susie, who is using that firm hand to grab something from the drinks trolley.
Lovely.
What have you grabbed for us there, Suze?
Grabbed a bottle of 6 o'clock gin and London Dry classic gin to make a gin and tonic for everybody.
Ooh.
Is a 6 o'clock gin the same as a 10 o'clock gin?
Well, you could have it at 10 o'clock, but the company's called 6 o'clock.
Oh, right. Okay, very good. And sorry, I didn't have you faded up, so we missed your extraordinary first word, but we got the gin and tonic bit at the end, which is very nice. So here we go with today's confession, which comes from Martin. Dear Pastor Simon, the forgiving faithful, and Holly. Well, today represented by Sister Susie. This confession goes back to the balmy summer of 1976, when I was a 12-year-old proper boy, in inverted commas, interested in boy things with my mates. And that summer, my family went camping in Newquay. I was a secret reader of Enid Blyton and envied the way the kids were allowed the freedom to go off on adventures without any adults. I discussed this with my much older and life-experienced 13-year-old brother, John, and we agreed to ask our parents if we could sleep in our own tent. At first they resisted, but eventually they agreed, and they purchased a small tent to accompany the large frame tent that usually housed 5 of us, including my 5-year-old sister. To our delight, when we reached the campsite, the site insisted that our small tent could not be set up next to our family tent. Our parents, though, once we had pitched the tent, set strict rules. No noise, we must tidy up for ourselves, and no leaving the tent at night under any circumstances. We readily agreed, but that first night we encountered an unforeseen problem. It was boiling hot during the day, meaning we'd been drinking lots of water and pop, and during the night this liquid needed to be released. We thought we could go to a nearby hedge, but when we opened the door flap it was pitch black, and we did not dare venture out and spent an uncomfortable first night. The next morning my brother went to the toilet/laundry block and returned with a metal watering can. It had the spout sprinkler removed and was used for carrying water to top up car radiators. We convinced ourselves it's fine to borrow this can for a week and for a wee, and placed it in the corner of our tent near the door flap and away from the bedding to avoid accidents. Now, one day we left our tent, and I have to say, Father Simon, the only word that works is wow. There was my sister with the most beautiful girl I had ever seen, aged around 13. Both my brother and I stopped and gaped open-mouthed. This was truly love at first sight, especially when she smiled and said her name was Helen. This undying love was cemented when she said she was there to look after her sisters, but she would rather be playing football. Until that moment, I had regarded girls as a bit of a nuisance and had absolutely no romantic interest in them at all. So this was truly a strange and wonderful moment for me. In those first few seconds, I had images of me and Helen holding hands, walking on the beach, and even having a kiss. Now, there was a strange silence as my brother and I walked to the beach. We had seen boys our age holding hands with girls and had always teased them for being soppy. It was obvious that we were both thinking the same about Helen, but neither wanted to be the first to admit it. Helen did join us later. She was quite a good footballer for a girl, and she advised she was I'm just saying that she was an Aston Villa fan. She made us very jealous when she boasted that she'd been to Wembley the previous year to watch Villa win a cup final. Both my brother and I are Ipswich Town supporters, and at that time we had never been to Wembley. At night, all my brother and I talked about was Helen, Helen, Helen. We could not wait to get up and spend our day with her. She obviously felt the same as she came round to our tent every morning. She even pretended not to notice the aroma coming from the watering can. Yes, it never dawned on us to empty it. The next few days flew by, and then at dinner one evening, outside the family tent, our parents announced that we needed to tidy up and pack the next morning because we were leaving tomorrow afternoon. My brother and I were distraught and begged our parents to stay an extra few days, but this was not possible as my dad had to return to work. We met Helen after dinner and we tried to think of ways to delay our departure. Helen suggested taking sugar from the lounge coffee area and putting it into my dad's petrol tank. She'd read in an adventure book that this stops a car starting. Don't try any of this at home.
No.
My brother and I quickly agreed that the consequences to our health when our father discovered sugar in his petrol tank were unthinkable and that it was morally wrong.
Correct.
That night we lay awake in our tent, and for the first time my brother and I admitted to each other that we were madly in love with Helen. We discussed various ideas, even the three of us running away together. But it was Helen's idea of the sugar in the petrol tank that kept coming back to us. Now, it might be divine intervention or maybe the aroma in the tent that led us to deciding on a plan. Yes, Father Simon, we sneaked out of our tent that night with a nearly full watering can full of you-know-what, and returned to our tent 50 minutes later with an empty can. We lay awake all night, wishing we could turn back the clock. Wish we hadn't done this dreadful act. We shared our nocturnal antics with Helen the next morning, and she cried and hugged us both. We huddled on the beach, fearful of our dad finding out what we'd done. Unbelievably, our plan worked better than we could have hoped. Whilst we were on the beach, my father had left the camp to top up the fuel in the car, and when returning, he had trouble with the car. My dad called it stuttering. Fearful of breaking down on the way home, he decided to have the car checked out. A mechanic visited but said the car would need to go to the garage, but it was a Friday, so it wouldn't be inspected until Saturday, so we'd have to stay an extra 2 nights and leave on Sunday morning. I honestly believe my parents were having such a good time, they were quite happy to stay anyway. We do not know what the mechanic's diagnosis of the problem was. We did not dare to pretend to show any interest. Helen was my first love. We exchanged addresses and myself and Helen became pen pals for a few years. I was even able to boast when Ipswich Town appeared at Wembley. I already have forgiveness from my parents who repeat this story to my kids on a regular basis, but I do seek forgiveness from fellow campers who may have looked for a way to top up their radiators during our stay, and any drivers who used the can after we left and wondered, what was that strange smell? Well, it was the smell of a couple of boys, basically. That's what it was, who had been ordered not to leave the tent. Sister Susie, what do you say to that?
Oh, I really like this one. I just think it's just really nice. First love, and the friends you make on holiday are amazing when you're little, and you have pen pals last for life sometimes, and I think that's really nice. However, I just think that they could have emptied the watering can throughout the week. I don't know if you want a week's worth of wee.
No, I don't think so.
Corner of the tent.
I don't think you do.
But maybe they have it. But also, I feel like I'm not gonna have forgiveness for the reason of quite a good footballer. Full stop.
Yes. Brackets for a girl. I was I was just reading out Martin. It was like a period piece, really.
It was.
So,
Brother Matthew. So no forgiveness from you, Susan. No.
Yes, I'm very close to no forgiveness just because the watering can. I mean, the watering can not only for days in a tent when it's baking hot.
Yes.
I mean, come on, I can't believe how are the parents not smelling that, even though the tent is next door. It's amazing. So, but I am going to forgive because in a way, love found a way, didn't it?
Did it?
In a way, it did.
Did it?
And the pen pals and all of that, and she went to Wembley, he didn't. Maybe they got married later. We don't know. It could have been, though. So for that reason, because love found a way through the wee, I'm going to forgive.
I think if he'd married Helen, he'd have told us. But
Would he?
anyway, yes,
Oh,
I think so. People's verdict, please. A first love story. Do you forgive Martin? Yes or no? On the text 61054. Just before the news, rather fabulous confession from Martin, who at the age of 12, on holiday in Torquay, fell in love with Helen, aged 13. But also his brother was there, so I'm not quite sure whether elder brother loved Helen more.
Could have been.
Anyway, but Martin says Helen was my first love. Anyway, they got away with staying longer on holiday by pouring an awful lot of wee into the dad's car. This is not something that should be approved of, but that was the basis of the confession, and the verdict came in like this.
Forgiven, says Richard in Birmingham. When camping, the standards of everyday life frankly go out the window. Going to the the loo in a watering can is a great idea and much more comfortable than going in a bush in the middle of the night.
Yes, very much.
Josh, though, says not forgiven. Filling up a watering can with wee on a hot sunny day, that sounds horrendously gross. And Maria in Norwich says not forgiven. Everything about this confession is a no-no. The peeing in the tent, putting said wee in the car, then to top it off, a good footballer for a girl. I hope Helen found a much better bloke to be with.
Well, that's very interesting. Yes, thank you very much indeed for all the verdicts. And if you have a confession, maybe inspired by that, I think the holiday romance confessions, they could come in. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. This is Greatest Hits Radio. It's confession time. Time to roll in the trolley. And let's just... there we go. What have we grabbed from the trolley today? I could do with some serious refreshment, I think, here.
Well, I've grabbed 3 halves of a lovely pale ale called Hum.
Hum?
Hum. Yeah,
Okay.
H-U-M. 4.8% from Beak Brewery, who are Sussex-based.
Oh.
So
Okay, just a half, Matt.
Yeah, just the half.
And you
Fine.
can't
Just a
have
half.
mine either.
Okay.
Sensible drinking at this time of day. Excellent. Thank you from the trolley. Today's confession comes from Calvin. I think this is okay. Well, too late now. Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Susie, and your loyal congregation, I seek your forgiveness. Oh, is it from Calvin? Did I say that?
You did say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I seek forgiveness for my sin. I think Matt is nailed on. Susie, not so much.
Ah.
Many years ago, when I was a young man of 21, I lived with a girl who I will call Aspen. Aspen was into lots of new agey type things. So there you go.
yeah, there you go.
Crystals, amethyst flowers, also healing rocks, incense cones, oracles,
Oracles.
and Mother Earth.
Oh, right.
She had a range of helpful soaps and candles that were useful for healing and spiritual growth.
Helpful soaps. Right.
Yeah. It's a thing.
It's not a thing. Oh, go on.
A helpful soap.
Already forgiven, by the way, but go on.
Spiritual growth, and also amulets and talismans for positivity and development.
Of course.
I continue to read. I guess Brother Matt will have snorted, but he shouldn't be so judgy. Has he actually tried healing rocks? No, is my guess.
No, he hasn't. No,
What
that's
about
true.
channeling?
Channeling.
Aspen loved that. Hire guides to guide you onwards at difficult times. Anyway, one of the things she was completely against was eating meat. I don't think you and Aspen would get
We're
on
not
very
getting
well.
on. No.
As the thought of those poor animals going to the abattoir filled her with horror. Being a good boyfriend, I agreed with her, and later on would tuck into a lovely lentil stew for my dinner. But, Father Simon, I longed for a juicy lamb or pork chop. Lentils are great and everything, but I needed flesh. So, okay, that could have come out slightly wrong.
Yes.
So when twice a week, as part of her new job, she had to go and work nights, I saw this as a chance to satisfy my carnivorous cravings. I would wave her goodbye, and once she was gone, I would whip out the frying pan and cook those lovely bits of meat. A few sprays of air freshener. I'd hide the meat packaging along with any bones, and she'd be none the wiser. Usually I would bury the bones in the rubbish bin underneath the wrapping for her latest purification herb bath flakes.
Purification bath flakes. Oh, come on.
Used to cleanse your body of negativity
I bet they
and
do.
psychic dramas.
Cleanse your wallet. Anyway, go on.
Anyway, this cunning plan worked for a few weeks until one night I was tucking into my lovely lamb chops and I heard a gasp. Aspen had come home early, and she knew.
Oh.
I could see the horror on her face at my betrayal of Mother Earth. She knew the house would be full of bad energy, bad chi, negative chi flowed everywhere. In a panic, I declared, and this is where we take a dangerous turn, I declared that this meat was actually a new range of meat sold in one of the big supermarkets called Rest in Pieces, which came from animals that died happy and from natural causes in their sleep.
Right.
Delighted that she could once again enjoy eating meat guilt-free, she soon joined in tucking into those lovely chops. This became a regular occurrence in the household, and she soon enjoyed the vast Rest in Pieces range, from beef burgers to chicken thighs. I, of course, had to do the shopping, as only I knew where to find this exclusive range, which didn't exist,
No.
just to underline the point. All this, Father Simon, came crashing down when she told her friends about this new range. They had been fascinated and intrigued, so they all turned up at the supermarket to buy this guilt-free range. It didn't take them long to realise they'd been made to look foolish. They had sugar-free, salt-free, gluten-free and meat-free, but not guilt-free. Aspen was as angry as her magical pendants would allow. However, I now realise that, of course, clearly I have to apologise to my ex, who had become hooked on meat again, and to the store workers who had to deal with a bunch of finger cymbal tinkling New Age followers asking where they could find the Rest in Pieces range. I beg for my meaty sins to be washed away and for destroying my ex's way of life. She had embraced vegetarianism.
She had.
And due to deceptive and thoroughly nasty Calvin, I'm afraid she's fallen...
Yeah.
Well, she's a fallen woman. I mean, basically, that's what Calvin is saying. Sister Susie, I'm not sure what you're going to make of this. What do you say?
Well, do you know what? I have to give Calvin something. That was quick thinking, that was. To think of that name, which was quite funny, off the cuff.
He might have thought of it later and just added it in, of course, but yes.
Very well done. However, I think... it's just not very nice. You didn't just do it once. Like, you could have just admitted and said, I've eaten meat. I'm really sorry. I won't do it again. But it's that you brought her in. You reeled her in and you converted her to eating meat. And she clearly didn't want to. And she was only doing it because she thought that it was okay. And for that reason, I don't think I can forgive you.
Well, I'm going to go look for some helpful soaps later.
Helpful soaps, dear,
Helpful
oh dear.
soaps, healing rocks.
And healing rocks that might get me through a psychic drama.
That is psychic drama, really.
Brother Matthew.
I mean, who are we to judge? Well, I'm here to judge, and I'm going to say that maybe those rocks and crystals and everything else don't really work. So,
what about the purification?
And the purification to bath flakes? Please, they've seen you coming. Absolutely seen you coming. Yes, no, I'm going to forgive because all these friends of hers with the finger symbols, all thinking they've been made to look foolish. I'm afraid that boat has sailed with your bath flakes and your crystals. You're already there. So I'm definitely going to forgive.
Okay, so do you forgive Calvin? It's the people's verdict. That's what we need here. Just before the news, we had a confession from Calvin, which was all about his girlfriend Aspen, who was into crystals and helpful soaps and healing candles. And she had decided not to eat meat again, but then was tricked into eating meat from the new range Rest in Pieces, where the animals had died of natural causes. So she then got hooked into meat again. Anyway, it was all very shocking and shambolic. And the people's verdict has been accumulated here.
So Ellie in the Scottish Borders says, not forgiven. He knew that lying to her would upset her. He should have just come clean in the first place. If you don't like crystals and healing bath salts, why would you go out with someone who likes them? Michelle in Norquay says, forgiven because of the genius brand Rest in Pieces. I just wish it existed. And finally, Neil in Wigan says, forgiven. I worked in the meat industry for a few years. I learned early on that animals that die of natural causes are termed fallen stock. And under UK food laws, such meat is not allowed in the food chain, predominantly because you have no idea how it died. Obviously, Aspen was not such a committed vegetarian as she claimed.
Right, okay, Neil in Wigan. That's undermining the whole story. Anyway, very good. Thanks very much indeed for all the verdicts that have come in for that. If you have a confession, we'd love to see it. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And it's confession time. Send your confession, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. The podcast available on Friday. And there it goes. There's the drinks trolley actually being wheeled into the studio today by top ace producer Susie. What have you taken from the trolley today, Suze?
Well, I've taken 3 large glasses and a bottle of rum.
Hey! Bit of rum.
Just for Matt. And some cola as well. So you can have a rum and cola.
Rum and coke.
Can I just have the cola, because I feel as though that's the responsible thing to do?
Yes, you can.
Thank you very much. Today's confession comes from Arkayla Mark. So yes, we're going scouting.
Yes.
Arkayla Mark says, Dear unbiased Speaker of the House Simon, leader of the Forgiving Party and spokesperson for the unforgiving opposition.
Yeah.
So I think we all know where we fit. As a Cub Scout leader of many years, about to retire and hang up his woggle, it is probably a good time to ask for forgiveness for a camping-related prank and subsequent misdemeanors before I leave my fellow leaders for pastures new. The incident in question took place in the mid-80s, when, as a much younger leader, I attended a week-long cub camp in the New Forest. The experienced team of leaders who accompanied the 20 or so Cub Scouts had become a well-oiled machine to ensure they were looked after, well-fed, kept warm, and generally enjoyed their week of fun away from home. Of course, the term well-oiled has another connotation that was also relevant at these times, as once the Cubs were all tucked up in their tents and lights were out, us leaders would sit around a fire with the beverage of choice. These were different times.
They were, weren't
Brother
they?
Simon.
Yeah.
But we were chatting and laughing. I don't think that kind of thing happens
No, it doesn't
now.
happen now. No.
It was at one of these late evening soirees that somebody mentioned a newspaper article reporting that in a couple of days a Russian satellite was going to re-enter the atmosphere and crash land somewhere on the Earth's surface, a threat that a few of the Cubs had overheard on the mini coach radio while we returned to camp that day. The point of impact was most likely the ocean, but typical of newspapers, they had shown how the south of England could be the crash site, if in doubt.
Yes.
And so, over the next 48 hours, using the empty plastic ball that formed the inner of the mini keg of beer that we were drinking, as I said, different times,
Oh, nice.
along with silver spray paint, glue, sticks, and red pens, we fashioned a rather realistic-looking Russian satellite, complete with red star and USSR stamped on the front. Whilst this was surreptitiously being prepared in an out-of-bounds area to the Cubs, we fed them with reports that it was ever more likely to crash in the UK than anywhere else, and showed them the newspaper articles. 2 nights later, in the wee small hours when tired Cub Scouts were fast asleep in their tents, my fellow leaders and I quietly dug a massive trench through the middle of our campsite, scattered hot ashes from the fire along its length, and planted the fake Russian satellite deep in the earth at one end, and retired to bed. We're in serious H.G. Wells territory here. That morning, all hell broke loose as the Cubs awoke and began to realize the satellite had actually crashed in the middle of our campsite. We quickly roped off the area around the wreckage and said that we would call the authorities, whatever that meant. The Cubs were completely convinced of its authenticity and were thrilled by the whole exciting incident. Scouts and Cubs from other sites would wander over to see what the commotion was all about. Our boys were delighted to explain the whole story of why their campsite had a huge trench of blackened grass and scorched earth through the middle of it, and what that partially visible wreck of the roped-off crater actually was. Following breakfast, we were due to visit the Bewley Motor Museum, so boarded the mini coach and headed out of camp, only for a police car to come rushing into the site entrance with its lights flashing. To this day, disappointingly, I have no idea why that happened. But of course, the Cubs were convinced it was because a Russian spy satellite had actually crash-landed into their camp. 40 years later, Chris, one of the young Cub Scouts on that camp, is now a fellow leader, and we have been friends for years. But I hate to break it to everyone, and to Chris, it was a fake. That thing that you think happened didn't happen.
Wow.
Those leaders you respected, we were the fakers. Speaker Simon, I do not seek forgiveness for the act itself. Harmless fun, I believe, and an act that brought great excitement to a bunch of youngsters. But I ask forgiveness from Chris, who at age 10 fell for the whole story. Deception, lies, misdirection, and scandal. That's what was perpetrated, and for which we have no excuse other than it was an absolute hoot. I apologize for raising the tale far too often, but it is a great example of what a fabulous, fun, and fulfilling time I have had as a Cub Scout leader, and wish the whole team much more of the same, but without me. And then he signs off, dib, 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 and indeed, dob, dob, dob. Classic sign-off there if we're going to do a Cub Scout confession. Thank you, Kayla Mark. Well, a shocking story of deception of young, impressionable children. Sister Susie.
Yes, I have to say, I like the creativity of making it
Very
out of
creative.
a mini keg beer, barrel. That was good. I've got lots of those at the pub, so maybe that's something we could do with those.
Yes.
But I do, the poor Cubs. that they were lied to. I just don't know. I just don't think, that it went on for so long, and it might have been a bit of fun for you, but I'm sure you could have done something similar without actually lying to all of these children. You're there to set an example, and lying probably isn't an example. So for that reason, I'm not going to forgive.
So harsh. Brother Matthew.
Yeah, no, I'm going to forgive. And here's the reason, many, many reasons why. No, I mean, number one, very good work in being able to recreate this Russian spy satellite from cake. I don't think the beer can have been very strong if you've managed to put all that together after drinking a whole keg of that beer. And also the Cubs were loving it. They were loving the fact that this satellite had fallen in the middle of their camp, and then the police come in as well. Oh yes, absolutely made their week. So dib das Vidania. For that reason, I'm going to forgive.
It was very Blue Peter, wasn't it, in its approach to faking a satellite?
Yeah.
Very Apollo 13, the movie, I thought. Okay, it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive our Kayla Bark for deceiving the Cubs? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. Just before the news, a confession from our Kayla Mark, from the heart of the Cold War. There was a week-long Cub camp in the New Forest and a Russian satellite re-entering the atmosphere. It just so happened that it appeared right in the middle of their campsite. However, they'd actually used the empty plastic ball from the inner bits of the mini keg that they'd been drinking. And a bit of sticky back plastic and some paint and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the kids were fooled for 40 years until today. Matt has the people's verdict.
Yes, pretty much everyone's forgiving tonight. Samantha in Walton-on-Thames says, easily forgiving this one. Sounds like a great story, and the police car with sirens was an excellent touch. This is what being part of Cubs is all about.
Great.
Stephen New Brighton, as a Queen Scout and former Scout leader, I salute the Arcala and wholeheartedly forgive. And Paul M says, what a brilliant and inspiring confession. Having been a Scout leader during the Cold War, the Russian spy satellite prank was right up there with what scouting's all about. Definitely forgiven.
Very good. Big thumbs up then for our Kayla Mark. Thank you very much, Steve, for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's young Susie who's grabbing something from the trolley as it goes whizzing past. What have you taken for us today?
I've taken a bottle of Saint-Germain, and I'm going to make us all Hugo Spritzes.
Okay, that sounds very
Hugo
nice.
Spritzers?
Yes, he's
Hugo.
Left back for Chelsea.
Italian.
That's right. He's Italian left back for Chelsea. Okay, today's confession comes from Daz. Thank you, Daz, for today's tale. Father Simon and the Brother and Sisterhood of Mercy. I am looking for forgiveness for something that happened a few years ago. Having listened to your podcast, I believe this would be the time and the place to confess. Hope you listen to the radio show as well. 4 till 7, Monday to Friday. It began a few years ago on a cold November evening in the coastal town of Weston-super-Mare. It was the night of the infamous carnival. My partner was working nights, so it was just me, my 6-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son. Sat in lazy boy chairs and push chairs for 3 hours, watching people dance and sing on the back of lorries and tractors. Isn't exactly my idea of a good time, but it's all about the kids.
Yeah.
And they absolutely loved it. Well, sometime into the evening, the kids started their favourite whiny phrase. Daddy, I'm hungry. Okay, all right, it's fine. Okay. Daddy, I'm hungry. As the carnival was edging to a finish, Daddy, I'm hungry. Okay. We decided to pack up early and head for the fish and chip shop. We ordered several sausages, a large cod and lots of chips, plus a lovely pot of curry sauce, which was poured into a polystyrene cup. We're all set for a fine evening.
Yes, we are.
Well, we sat on a lovely, long, enclosed bench with nice bushes and trees surrounding us, trying to maneuver everything. Push chair, lazy boy chairs, kids, and so on is a pretty mean feat, especially late in the evening. So, with all the hustle and bustle of trying to sort out the chips, the fish, the sausages, I had accidentally knocked over the pot of curry sauce. It had gone all over the left-hand corner of the lovely enclosed bench. Bother and blast, I yelled in frustration as I lost the beautiful curry sauce to the elements. Anyway, I felt the best thing to do was to move all of the stuff, the pushchair, the lazy boy chairs, the kids, to the other lovely enclosed bench, which was about 10 yards away. I did rescue a little bit of the curry sauce, but the rest of it was just smeared all over the bench. Really, not much I could do about that. Anyway, the kids and I were settled on our new bench and happily tucked into our food. It was only a few minutes later when I noticed a large group of women, late teens, I would say, coming out of the chip shop. They were very loud and had definitely had a few drinks. Oh, selfie with our food! Let's get a picture of everyone. Selfie time. They giggled in merriment. That's my impression of teenage
I like
girls.
it.
Yeah.
It was then that one of them approached me and asked if I would take a picture of them all with one of their phones. Reluctantly, I said yes, despite the fact that clearly I was a dad on my own with 2 young children trying to eat my fish and chips in peace. Well, imagine my horror and shock when, as I held one of their phones up to take a picture, that they decided to sit down on the lovely enclosed bench that we had just sat on 5 minutes ago. My eyes were drawn in particular to the left-hand side of the bench, and to make matters worse, the girl that seemed to sit in the spot where I'd spilled the curry sauce was wearing white jeans.
Oh, dear.
Oh, no.
As I took the picture, it did appear, however, that she hadn't noticed this fact. She knew she was wearing white jeans. She didn't know she was sitting in curry sauce. My hand literally shook as I passed the phone back to one of them. Well, I scurried back to the kids and straight away... back to the kids and straight away hid the empty pot of curry sauce from out of view. I then watched the group of girls walk swerving past all over the pavement, eating their chips and screaming and giggling. My eyes were drawn to the girl in white jeans as she went past. Yep, big browny yellow patch splattered all over the seating area of her white jeans. It was the kind of thing my son, who was 2 at the time, would need a whole pack of wet wipes to clean off. And off they went into the distance as happy as Larry. I'm guessing till up to this point where it was one of her friends might have noticed the stain on the rear of her jeans, and at that point that would have been the end of their evening, because there are some stains that you can live with, Father Simon, and others that you really can't.
Yeah.
I don't know, as I didn't stick around long enough to find out. In fact, I scurried again, away with the kids, an entourage of stuff that I had, quickly before anyone else sat on the curry sauce-stained bench, because it remained stained. Father Simon, I'm seeking forgiveness from that girl in the white jeans, as it would have been my fault that your night was probably ruined by having what would have looked like basically soiled clothing on your night out. It was me, the guy who took the photo of you November 2022 at Western Carnival. I wonder if they're listening and still have the picture. I'm also seeking forgiveness for anyone else that might have accidentally sat on that bench. I'm very sorry. Please remember, it's very difficult to clean up a pot of spilled curry sauce when you have 2 hungry children, the push chairs, the lazy boy chairs, and lots of takeaway food and so on. And we get the picture. We know the excuses. Daz wants forgiveness. Does he get it from Sister Susie? I suspect not. Let's find out.
Well, Daz, I am learning this. Children come with a lot of stuff.
They do.
You know, a real lot of stuff. And I understand. However, I just don't think I can ever forgive you, because, as you said, your son needed a lot of wet wipes for getting messy, so therefore you had a lot of wet wipes, so therefore you could have cleaned it up. Once the children had the fish and chips and they were eating it and they were busy, they're not bothering you for a couple of minutes. You definitely have enough time to get those wet wipes out and do a little bit of, cleaning up on there. And that poor girl that had a soggy bottom, that's just not...
She did.
No one wants a soggy bottom, and you could have at least told her, even if you didn't get to mop it up in time. So no forgiveness.
Okay. Yeah, it would have looked as though she'd done a whoopsie, as I think Frank Spencer might have said. Brother Matthew.
Great reference. Who doesn't look down behind them before they sit down outside? What kind of idiot doesn't do that? We all look down. No, you always look down.
She was drunk.
Could it be birds around? Could be chips? Could be curry sauce? Could be anything around there. So isn't it really her fault? It's definitely her fault. Too interested in getting on the gram, as the teenagers say.
Nice.
So, yeah, very much so. Some mothers do have them. So, for that reason,
yes,
I'm going to forgive.
Okay, so it's the people's verdict. Please, do you forgive Daz, yes or no? 61054 on the text, and the first word is Simon. But just before the news, we had a confession from Daz involving him, a harassed dad, kids, curry sauce, a bench, Western Superman, a woman in white jeans. The people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
Not forgiven, says Leanne in Great Ayton. I agree with Sister Susie. They should have cleaned it up.
They should.
Brenda in North Yorkshire, not forgiven. I would be furious if that had been me. Steam coming out of my nose and ears. Lol.
Lol.
Lol. And Greg, enjoying the sun at the Bristol Harbour Festival, says, excellent confession. 5 out of 5 for the podcast. I have to agree with Matt. Look where you're sitting and stop with the gram.
Stop with the grams. And if you have a confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.